I, Audrey Mitchell, 26 years old, never expected my life to change forever during a regular Friday night shift at the Ivory. That moment when Richard Hayes, the billionaire CEO everyone knew, signed that document right in front of me, and I recognized my father's signature, the father who'd supposedly died 20 years ago. Before I begin my story, where are you watching from today? Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever had that moment when your whole world turned upside down in a single second. Trust me, you'll want to hear what happened next when I decided to confront one of the most powerful men in America about his stolen identity. My life before that night was a constant struggle. Art history degree gathering dust while I balanced double shifts at the Ivory, Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant. The kind of place where entrees cost more than my daily pay, and celebrities needed reservations weeks in advance. The kind of place where I didn't belong, except to carry trays and smile politely. Student loans crushed me every month, but those weren't even my biggest worry. Mom's medical bills kept piling up as her condition worsened. Kidney disease doesn't care that you can't afford the treatments. Some nights I'd come home to our tiny Queens apartment, so tired I'd fall asleep, still wearing my uniform, only to wake up a few hours later to do it all again. The Ivory's management expected perfection. Crisp black uniform, hair pulled back neatly, invisible until needed, then appearing with perfect timing. 20 tables of demanding customers, each expecting to be treated like royalty. I'd mastered the art of the professional smile, the one that never reaches your eyes but looks convincing enough to earn decent tips. That Friday started like any other, the restaurant humming with weekend energy, kitchen staff shouting orders, the clink of expensive glassware. The VIP section buzzed with the usual suspects: Wall Street executives, tech entrepreneurs, old money families pretending they weren't examining each other's jewelry. Then Richard Hayes walked in. Everyone who worked at the Ivory knew Hayes. Billionaire tech mogul and real estate developer, famous for his ruthless business tactics and extravagant lifestyle. His face graced business magazines monthly. Hayes Enterprises owned half the buildings in Midtown. He always requested the same corner table, always ordered the same rare bourbon, always left exactly 20% tip, not a penny more or less. I wasn't supposed to serve his table. That honor belonged to senior staff, but Marcus called in sick, and suddenly I was being briefed by my manager. Do not make eye contact unless he speaks directly to you. Pour wine from the right, remove plates from the left. If he seems displeased about anything, alert me immediately. Hayes arrived with 3 men in identical dark suits, all carrying leather portfolios. Important business dinner. I kept my eyes lowered, followed protocol perfectly. They barely acknowledged my existence as I described the evening's specials. 2 hours of tense service passed without incident. I was placing their dessert order when Hayes pulled documents from one of the portfolios. The men huddled over papers, voices low. As I returned with their desserts, Hayes was signing the final page with a flourish. Something about that signature caught my eye. The distinctive way he formed the capital letters, the unusual slash across the final letter. I nearly dropped the dessert tray. I'd seen that exact signature hundreds of times growing up. On birthday cards, on school permission forms, on the last note my father ever wrote before he disappeared. My body went cold. The room seemed to spin as I mechanically set down dessert plates. 20 years of memories crashed through my mind. Dad teaching me to ride a bike, Dad taking me to museums on Sundays, Dad promising to return from his very important business trip, then nothing but an empty car found near a bridge, and a suicide note my mother refused to believe was real. The crystal glass slipped from my hand, shattering on the marble floor. Conversation stopped. All eyes turned to me. Is competent service too much to ask for? Hayes snapped, not even looking up. I'm so sorry, sir, I stammered, kneeling to clean the mess, trying to hide my shaking hands. As I gathered the shards, I risked another glance at his face. Hayes had the same eyes, my father's eyes. But everything else, the jawline, the nose, even his hairline, was different. Expensive surgery could explain that. I retreated to the kitchen, locked myself in the employee bathroom, and tried to breathe. The man who abandoned us 20 years ago is sitting at table 7, pretending to be someone else entirely. And before he leaves tonight, I'm going to confront him about it. The moment I saw that signature, memories I'd buried for 2 decades came flooding back in vivid detail. My father, James Mitchell, wasn't just any dad. He was my hero, tall and confident with warm brown eyes that crinkled when he smiled. Every Sunday was our special day. He'd take me to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, patiently explaining brushstrokes and color theory to a fascinated 6-year-old. "You have an artist's eye, Audrey," he'd say, lifting me up to see paintings mounted too high for my child's view. Dad worked as an architectural designer for Brennan and Associates, a small but prestigious firm. He'd bring home blueprints, spreading them across our dining table, teaching me about scale and proportion. I'd sit on his lap, watching in awe as he sketched buildings that seemed to defy gravity. His hands moved with precision, creating worlds on paper. "Buildings are just art people can live in," he'd explain. "Those were the good years, before Mom got sick." Grace Mitchell had always been vibrant and quick to laugh. The kidney disease changed everything. It started with fatigue she couldn't shake. Then came the diagnosis, the hospitalizations, the mountains of medical bills. Dad started working longer hours, taking on additional projects. "Just until we get ahead of these bills," he promised. The late nights became business trips. Weekend museum visits became rare treats. I'd wait by the window, clutching my sketchbook, hoping to see his car pull into our driveway. Mom tried to hide her worry, but I noticed the hushed phone calls, the tear-streaked faces, the growing tension. The last time I saw my father, I was 6. He knelt down, straightened my school uniform collar, and promised to be back from his very important business meeting in time for my art show that weekend. He never returned. 3 days later, police found his car abandoned near the Queensboro Bridge. Inside was a handwritten note. "I'm sorry. I can't do this anymore. Tell Audrey I love her." Mom collapsed when the officers delivered the news. They called it suicide, case closed. But Mom never believed it. "Your father wouldn't leave us like that," she insisted. "Even as bill collectors called, and we moved to a smaller apartment. Something happened to him." The police eventually stopped taking her calls. Life moved on. We survived, barely. I finished my shift at the Ivory on autopilot, mind racing. Instead of confronting Hayes immediately, I ducked into the locker room and pulled out my phone. My hands trembled as I searched Richard Hayes' CEO biography. The results showed dozens of articles about his business empire, philanthropic work, and ruthless corporate takeovers. Hayes Enterprises, founded approximately 15 years ago, had grown from a small tech startup to a multinational conglomerate. But details about Hayes himself were surprisingly sparse. No childhood photos in the image search. Vague mentions of an underprivileged background and self-made success. Just the polished narrative of a private billionaire. Most suspicious was his age. According to official records, Richard Hayes was 58, exactly how old my father would be now. I found a digital copy of Forbes with Hayes' signature on a featured document. Zooming in, I compared it mentally with the birthday cards stored in my memory box at home. The similarity was unmistakable. The same distinctive curl on the capital letters, the same slash through the final letter. It couldn't be coincidence. "You okay?" Bailey, my coworker, startled me from my trance. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Something like that," I muttered. "Hey, what do you know about Richard Hayes?" Bailey rolled her eyes. "Rich asshole who tips exactly 20%. Always has the duck confit. Always drinks Blanton's. Always comes on Friday nights around 8. Why?" "Just curious." The information about his regular schedule was useful. I'd have another chance to see him. "Does he ever come with family?" "Never seen him with anyone but business people. Probably doesn't have time for family between counting his money and ruining lives." Bailey shrugged, returning to her locker. I changed out of my uniform and headed straight to my mother's apartment in Queens. The hour-long subway ride gave me time to organize my thoughts, though each theory seemed more outlandish than the last. Could my father have faked his death? Stolen someone's identity? Or was this all an impossible coincidence? Mom's subsidized apartment building elevator was broken again. I climbed 5 flights, key already in hand. The space was small but immaculately kept, Mom's way of maintaining dignity despite our circumstances. I found her in her recliner, attached to the dialysis machine she used 3 times daily. The treatments left her exhausted, her once vibrant face now gaunt. "You're home early," she noted, muting the television. "Everything okay, Mom?" I started carefully, sitting across from her. "I need to ask you about Dad." Her expression immediately closed off. "Audrey, we've been through this." "I know, but was his body ever found? Did you identify it?" She turned away, staring at the wall where family photos once hung before we'd pawned the frames. There was no body, just the note, the car. The police said jumpers sometimes aren't recovered, so he could have. "Don't." Her voice cracked. "Don't give me hope after all these years. It nearly killed me the first time." I pressed on gently. "Do you still have any of his things? Letters, documents, anything with his handwriting?" Mom sighed deeply. "There's a box in my closet. Top shelf. But Audrey, whatever you think you've found, let it go. Some ghosts should stay buried." The shoebox was dusty, untouched for years. Inside were Dad's old letters, cards, sketches of buildings never built. With shaking hands, I found a birthday card he'd written me. The signature was unmistakable, identical to what I'd seen Richard Hayes sign hours earlier. When I emerged from the bedroom, Mom was watching me with tears in her eyes. "Why are you doing this to yourself? To us?" I couldn't tell her what I'd found. "Not yet, not without more proof. I just needed to remember him," I lied, kissing her forehead. "Get some rest. I'll see you tomorrow." As I left her apartment, my sadness crystallized into determination. If Richard Hayes was really James Mitchell, my father, I would uncover the truth, and he would answer for the 20 years of struggle he'd left in his wake. The next morning, I withdrew most of my meager savings and headed to a small office building in Brooklyn. The faded lettering on the frosted glass door read Wells Investigations. Inside, Rebecca Wells sat behind a cluttered desk, coffee cup in hand, looking nothing like the private investigators from movies. No trench coat, no fedora, just a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and practical clothes. "So you think your dead daddy is actually Richard Hayes, billionaire extraordinaire?" Rebecca summarized after I'd finished my story, her tone skeptical but not dismissive. I spread my evidence on her desk, the magazine clipping with Hayes' signature, my father's birthday card, photos of both men. The signatures match. He'd be the right age. And there was never a body found. Rebecca studied the materials, tapping a pen against her teeth. "Coincidences happen, kid. Rich guys have similar signatures. Doesn't mean your dad faked his death and became a billionaire. That's why I need your help. To prove it one way or another." She named her hourly rate, which made me wince. "I can't afford much," I admitted. "But I work at Donovan's Diner on weekends. I could cover some of it with shifts there." Rebecca's expression softened slightly. "Tell you what, I'll do some preliminary digging, just the basics. Public records, news archives. If there's nothing, we drop it. If I find something interesting, we discuss payment plans." I agreed immediately, providing every detail I could remember about my father. His full name, birthday, social security number from old tax forms, the architectural firm where he'd worked. Rebecca took notes, asked pointed questions, and promised to call within a few days. Meanwhile, I returned to the Ivory with renewed purpose. I requested permanent Friday shifts, telling my manager I needed the consistent schedule for my mother's medical appointments. He agreed reluctantly, warning me not to drop any more glasses. During my next few shifts, I subtly questioned longtime staff members about Richard Hayes. Most knew only his public reputation, but Winston, the bartender who'd worked at the Ivory for 15 years, remembered when Hayes first started coming. "Must have been around 2005, Winston recalled as he polished glasses. "Wasn't famous then, quiet guy, but you could tell he had money, always paid cash. Started requesting the VIP section after his first company went public. Does he ever mention family? Where he's from? Winston shook his head. Man's a vault. Never talks personal business where staff can hear. Why the interest? Just curious about the big tippers. I lied smoothly. After my shift ended, I noticed Hayes's driver waiting outside in a black Bentley. I approached casually. Lighting a cigarette, I had no intention of smoking. Long night? I asked, offering him one. The driver, a man named Frank with salt and pepper hair, accepted gratefully. They're all long with him. He nodded toward the restaurant. Over the next 15 minutes, I learned Hayes lived in a penthouse on Park Avenue, kept to himself, and was particular about his privacy. Frank had never driven any family members, never taken Hayes to personal events, only business and the occasional charity function. Man works 24/7. Probably sleeps with his laptop, Frank chuckled. The following week, Hayes brought his personal assistant to dinner, a tense young man named Thomas, who kept Hayes' schedule and anticipated his needs before they were voiced. I made a point of providing exceptional service, ensuring Thomas noticed my efficiency. When Hayes stepped away to take a call, I seized my opportunity. You must have the hardest job in New York, I said, refilling Thomas's water glass. He looked up, surprised to be addressed directly. It's demanding, I bet. Has he always been so intense? Or just since he became famous? Thomas studied me carefully. Mr. Hayes values his privacy. He doesn't discuss his past. No childhood stories, college adventures. Everyone has a background. Not everyone wishes to share it. Thomas's polite smile didn't reach his eyes. The conversation ended when Hayes returned. But I'd planted a seed. Rebecca called 3 days later, her voice tense. We need to meet. Not over the phone. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop halfway between her office and the Ivory. Rebecca arrived with a manila folder tucked under her arm, ordered a black coffee, and led me to the most isolated table. I found something, she said without preamble, opening the folder. Hayes Enterprises acquired a small architectural firm in 2005. Guess which one? My heart raced. Brennan Associates? Bingo. The firm where your father worked. Hayes bought it, stripped its assets, and dissolved the company. She showed me the acquisition paperwork, pointing to a particular clause. This is interesting. Hayes specifically acquired all intellectual property and design patents. Unusual focus for a tech entrepreneur buying a small architectural firm. My father was working on some innovative sustainable design concepts before he disappeared, I recalled. He was excited about potential patents. Rebecca nodded. There's more. The day after your father's disappearance, a deposit of $250,000 was made to your family's bank account. Money was withdrawn gradually over the next year until the account was closed. This was news to me. My mother never mentioned any money. Maybe she didn't want to explain where it came from. Or maybe she didn't know. The paperwork was all in your father's name. Rebecca leaned forward. Audrey, there are several possibilities here. Your father could have sold information to Hayes and then entered witness protection. Hayes could have stolen your father's identity. Your father could have been paid to disappear. Without more evidence, we're just guessing. I need concrete proof. Something indisputable. DNA would be conclusive, Rebecca suggested. But getting Hayes' DNA without his knowledge or consent skirts some serious legal boundaries. He eats at my restaurant every Friday, I pointed out. Wine glasses, utensils. Rebecca held up a warning hand. Before we go there, you need to understand something. If Hayes is your father, and he went to these lengths to create a new identity, he's not going to be happy about being found. Men with billions don't get caught unless they want to be. He owes us 20 years of answers, I insisted. And my mother's running out of time. Rebecca sighed, sliding a small evidence collection kit across the table. Friday night. Get something he touched directly to his mouth. And Audrey? Be careful. People who can afford to disappear once can afford to make others disappear too. Friday arrived with thunderstorms that matched my turbulent emotions. I'd rehearsed the plan countless times in my head. Serve Hayes normally, collect his wine glass after his first drink, package it carefully in the evidence bag Rebecca had given me. Simple in theory, terrifying in practice. The restaurant buzzed with its usual Friday energy, yet everything felt different. Each time the door opened, my heart nearly stopped. At 8:15, Hayes arrived with 4 executives in tow, all carrying leather portfolios identical to the ones from his previous visit. "Mr. Hayes, welcome back," the maitre d' greeted, leading them to the regular corner table. My manager caught my eye, nodding slightly. Hayes was mine to serve tonight. I approached with practiced professionalism, reciting the evening specials without a tremble in my voice. Hayes barely glanced up from his phone, ordering his usual Blanton's bourbon and duck confit. His associates followed with their orders, none making eye contact. As I arranged place settings, I studied Hayes covertly. The shape of his ears, identical to the ones in my childhood photos. The way he held his pen, exactly how my father had shown me to hold mine for proper drawing. Even the slight tilt of his head when listening, a gesture so familiar it made my chest ache. When I returned with their drinks, Hayes took a long sip of bourbon, setting the glass down precisely 2 inches from the edge of the table. My father had been just as particular about placement. The executives began discussing an upcoming merger, spreading documents across the table. Hayes contributing occasionally with the same authoritative tone my father had used when explaining complicated concepts to my mother. "Is there a problem with the service?" Hayes suddenly asked, catching me watching him. "No, sir." "I apologize," I stammered, realizing I'd been staring. "You just remind me of someone." Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition? Concern? It vanished before I could identify it. "The duck confit," he said dismissively, returning to his conversation. After they'd begun eating, I carefully collected Hayes' empty bourbon glass, wrapping it in a napkin. In the kitchen's blind spot, I slipped it into the evidence bag and secured it in my locker. My hands shook from adrenaline and fear. When I returned to their table, Hayes was studying me with unusual intensity. Our eyes met briefly, and for a heart-stopping moment, I thought I saw something familiar in his gaze, a softening around the edges, the ghost of my father's expression. The moment passed. Hayes turned to his personal assistant. "Thomas, I want a different server." My stomach dropped. "Sir, have I done something wrong?" "Your service is distracted," Hayes stated coldly. "I prefer professionalism." My manager appeared instantly, apologizing profusely and assigning another server to the table. In the kitchen, he cornered me. "What did you do to upset Mr. Hayes? He's one of our most valuable customers." "Nothing," I insisted. "I was completely professional. One more incident like this, and you're fired. Understood?" I nodded, stomach churning with anxiety and anger. At least I had the glass. But Hayes's reaction suggested he might have recognized me after all. "After my shift," Rebecca called. "Something's happened. Meet me at my office now." I clutched the evidence bag tightly as I hurried through Brooklyn's rain-slicked streets. Rebecca was waiting outside her building, pacing nervously. "I have his glass," I said, holding up the bag. "That might not be necessary anymore," she replied, ushering me inside. Her office lights were dimmed, files scattered across her desk. "The DNA test from the fork you gave me earlier this week came back." My breath caught. "And? It's a match, Audrey. Richard Hayes is biologically James Mitchell, your father." Despite suspecting it, hearing confirmation made my knees buckle. Rebecca guided me to a chair. "There's more," she continued, showing me a folder. After confirming the DNA match, I dug deeper. "Found records of extensive plastic surgery performed on a patient matching your father's description in Brazil, 2004. Completely new face. The surgeon specializes in identity concealment." "Brazil?" I echoed, stunned. "There's a pattern here. Your father disappears, presumed dead. A year later, Richard Hayes emerges in New York with no verifiable background but significant capital. He acquires the architectural firm where your father worked, then patents several innovative design concepts suspiciously similar to ones your father was developing." Rebecca spread out financial documents across her desk. I tracked financial movements through offshore accounts. Millions moved from numbered accounts in the Cayman Islands to initial Hayes Enterprises investments. "The timing aligns perfectly with your father's disappearance." "But why?" I whispered. Why abandon us? Why change his identity? Rebecca hesitated. I found something else. 3 months before your father disappeared, Brennan and Associates came under investigation for financial irregularities, specifically embezzlement. She showed me scanned newspaper clippings. The investigation was dropped after your father's suicide. The company struggled financially. Then Hayes acquired it. But here's the kicker. Your father's business partner, Stephen Brennan, committed actual suicide 2 months after the acquisition. His suicide note mentioned betrayal by those I trusted most. The implications hit me like physical blows. My father had stolen money from his firm, faked his death to escape consequences, abandoned his family, reinvented himself as Richard Hayes, used the embezzled funds to build an empire. And somewhere along the way, he decided we weren't worth coming back for. I sat in stunned silence as Rebecca continued. He sacrificed everything and everyone to become Richard Hayes. The question is, what are you going to do with this information? My shock crystallized into something harder, colder. He left us with nothing. Mom's been sick for 20 years, working until dialysis made it impossible, drowning in medical debt. Meanwhile, he's been living in penthouses and flying private jets. My voice broke. Mom might not survive until her transplant comes through, if it ever does. And he's been alive this whole time, with billions of dollars. Rebecca regarded me cautiously. Legally speaking, blackmail is a felony. I don't want his money, I said, though part of me screamed that we deserved every penny. I want justice. I want him to face what he did. I want the world to know who Richard Hayes really is. His legal team will destroy you, Rebecca warned. Men like Hayes don't get taken down by waitresses, even when they're right. We have DNA evidence. We have the surgery records. We have the financial trail. And he has billions of dollars, teams of lawyers, and friends in high places, Rebecca countered. Think carefully about what justice looks like here. Is it exposure? Compensation? What outcome serves you and your mother best? I considered this. He deserves to lose everything, just like we did. Rebecca sighed, gathering the documents into a folder. I'll continue building the case, but proceed carefully. Hayes didn't become a billionaire by being careless. And Audrey? Watch your back. Men with this much to hide often have ways of making problems disappear. For the next 2 weeks, I became Richard Hayes's shadow. I memorized his schedule by following him discreetly after work hours. Monday mornings, private gym in his building at 5 a.m. Tuesdays, lunch meetings at Le Bernardin. Wednesdays, late nights at Hayes Enterprises headquarters. Thursdays, virtual board meetings from his penthouse. Fridays, dinner at the Ivory followed by drinks at the Monarch Club. I kept a detailed log of his movements, noting security protocols, regular contacts, even the timing of traffic lights along his usual routes. I discovered he had exactly 4 regular drivers, 7 security personnel working in rotating shifts, and a private elevator to his penthouse that required both retinal scan and keycard access. During my reconnaissance, I learned Hayes had scheduled a major press conference for the following month. Hayes Enterprises was announcing a revolutionary sustainable architecture initiative, likely built on my father's stolen designs, and Hayes himself would present to investors and media. It seemed the perfect opportunity for a public confrontation. Hundreds of witnesses, press cameras rolling, Hayes unable to escape without causing a scene. I began formulating a plan to attend the event, strategizing how to get close enough to confront him with the evidence. Rebecca called during my planning, voice tight with concern. We have a problem. Hayes' security team has been asking about you at the Ivory. They have your employee photo, full name, and address. You're being investigated. My blood ran cold. How did they? You haven't exactly been subtle, Rebecca interrupted. Following his car, taking photos of his building, asking his staff questions. Professional security people notice these things. Audrey, what should I do? Back off. Now. Before this gets dangerous. Hayes knows someone's watching him, and he has the resources to make problems go away permanently. I considered her advice but couldn't bring myself to stop. I've come too far. The press conference is in 3 weeks. That's my chance to expose him. Audrey, listen to me. I've been doing this job for 20 years. When wealthy, powerful people feel cornered, they don't play by the rules. Please, be smart about this. I promised to be more careful, then promptly purchased a blonde wig, glasses, and clothes, unlike anything in my usual wardrobe. My disguise wasn't movie quality, but it changed my appearance enough to continue surveillance without immediate recognition. The disguise worked for exactly 2 days before I noticed a black SUV following me home from work. I ducked into a crowded department store, weaving through shoppers and exiting through a service door. The SUV remained parked outside, 2 men in suits watching the main entrance. Heart pounding, I took a circuitous route home, constantly checking for tails. My apartment seemed untouched, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I called Rebecca, who advised me to stay somewhere else for a few days. The next morning, a young man approached me outside the Ivory before my shift. Well-dressed, polished, with an earpiece partially visible beneath his collar. I recognized him immediately as Thomas, Hayes's personal assistant. "Miss Mitchell," he said quietly, "Mr. Hayes would like to know why you're following him." I froze, fight or flight response triggering. "I don't know what you're talking about," I managed, turning to leave. Thomas stepped smoothly into my path. "I know who you really are, Audrey Mitchell, daughter of James Mitchell, presumed dead 2003. My legs nearly gave out. "How did you—" "Mr. Hayes is very thorough." Thomas studied me with unexpected sympathy. "But so am I. And I've found some inconsistencies in Mr. Hayes' history that trouble me." I stared at him, uncomprehending. "You're working against your boss? Let's say I have questions about Mr. Hayes that official channels won't answer. Questions about where he came from, how he acquired his initial patents, why certain names from his past have been systematically erased. Why are you telling me this?" Thomas glanced around carefully. "Because you might have answers I need, and I have access you need." It could be a trap, but something in Thomas's expression seemed genuine. "What kind of access?" "Security protocols, schedule details, building access. In exchange for what you know about Hayes's real identity." I considered the offer. An ally inside Hayes's organization could be invaluable, but trusting someone in his inner circle was risky. "How do I know you won't report everything to Hayes?" "Because I've suspected for 2 years that Richard Hayes isn't who he claims to be. If I wanted to report you, I would have done it already, instead of approaching you directly." Thomas handed me a business card with only a phone number. "Think about it. Call that number from a public phone, not your cell." After Thomas left, I debated whether to trust him. That evening, I called the number from a hotel lobby payphone. Thomas answered immediately, providing detailed information about Hayes's security system that I knew was accurate from my own surveillance. He also revealed Hayes had scheduled an unexpected trip to Switzerland following the press conference. "He's planning to stay at his chalet there indefinitely," Thomas explained. "I've been instructed to clear his schedule for 3 months following the press conference." "He's running," I realized. "He knows someone's investigating him, possibly. Or it could be related to the merger announcement. Either way, if you're planning something, the press conference is your last chance before he leaves the country." We formed an uneasy alliance. Thomas provided Hayes' detailed schedule, building access codes, and security rotations. I shared my evidence connecting Hayes to James Mitchell. Together, we began piecing together the complete picture of my father's transformation into Richard Hayes. I returned to my apartment that night to find it ransacked. My research materials were scattered, laptop missing, and the box of my father's mementos emptied onto the floor. Most disturbing, the photos of my father had been removed from their frames. My phone rang. "Mom, Audrey, there were men here asking about you," she said, voice trembling. "They said they were colleagues, but they frightened me. They asked about your father, about old photos." Fear gripped me. "Mom, I'm coming over." "No, I'm fine. Mrs. Abernathy from next door is staying with me." "What's going on, Audrey? What have you gotten involved in?" "I'll explain everything soon," I promised. "Just don't talk to any strangers, okay?" The next day, Rebecca called in a panic. My office was broken into last night. Computer hacked, files on Hayes missing. I've backed everything up off-site, but this is getting dangerous. We met at a public park, choosing an open area where no one could approach unnoticed. Rebecca looked haggard, constantly scanning our surroundings. Hayes has connections to some dangerous people, she warned. Former clients of mine who investigated his business dealings in Dubai found themselves facing trumped-up criminal charges. A journalist who questioned his rise to prominence had a career-ending scandal. These aren't coincidences. What are you saying? I'm saying you should consider walking away. Your mother needs you. Is exposing Hayes worth risking your safety or hers? The thought of Mom alone and vulnerable made my stomach twist, but backing down now felt impossible. He's planning to leave the country after the press conference. If I don't act now, he escapes again. Rebecca rubbed her temples. At least be smart about it. We need to accelerate our timeline. Get everything in order before he realizes how much we know. Thomas called that evening, voice low and urgent. Hayes knows someone accessed his private server. He's increased security, changed all codes, added personnel. He's growing paranoid, barely sleeping. I've never seen him this agitated. Has he connected it to me specifically? Not yet, but he's ordered background checks on everyone he's interacted with in the past month. It's only a matter of time. Then we need to move faster, I decided, before he disappears again. I was midway through my shift at the Ivory when my phone vibrated with a call from Mom's neighbor. My blood ran cold as Mrs. Abernathy explained that Mom had collapsed while getting the mail. The ambulance had already taken her to Queen's Memorial Hospital. I abandoned my tables without explanation, ignoring my manager's shouts as I raced out the door. The subway seemed agonizingly slow as I traveled from Manhattan to Queens, scenarios spinning through my mind, each worse than the last. At the hospital, I found Mom in intensive care, unconscious and connected to machines I didn't understand. The doctor explained her condition in gentle but clinical terms: complete kidney failure, dialysis no longer sufficient, emergency transplant needed. Without it, her prognosis was measured in weeks, not months. We've fast-tracked her on the transplant list, the doctor explained. But with her blood type and antibody profile, finding a match quickly will be challenging. What about private treatment options? I asked desperately. Special programs? The doctor's expression turned apologetic. There are experimental treatments at Mayo Clinic and Johns Hopkins, but, he hesitated, your mother's insurance has already denied coverage based on her pre-existing condition. These treatments would cost upwards of $500,000, not including transportation and aftercare. The number struck me like a physical blow. $500,000 might as well be $500 million on a waitress's salary. Yet it was pocket change to Richard Hayes, to my father. I stayed by Mom's side all night. Near dawn, she woke briefly, disoriented but lucid enough to recognize me. Her hand felt fragile in mine, fingers cold despite the hospital's warmth. Audrey, she whispered, don't look so worried. I've survived worse. I fought back tears. The doctors are doing everything they can. She squeezed my hand with surprising strength. Listen to me. Whatever you're investigating about your father, let it go. Some ghost should stay buried. How did you? Mrs. Abernathy told me about the men asking questions. And I know you, Audrey. You've never accepted his death. Her breathing became labored. Promise me you'll focus on your life, not chasing shadows. I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth, that her husband was alive, wealthy beyond imagination, while she fought for her life in an underfunded hospital. Instead, I made a bedside promise I had no intention of keeping, watching as she drifted back to sleep. The doctor confirmed what I already knew. Mom's treatment options were severely limited without financial resources. Regular hospitals couldn't prioritize her case over younger patients with better prognoses. Private clinics required payment up front. After 3 days at Mom's bedside, surviving on vending machine, coffee, and determination, I made a decision. Richard Hayes, my father, had resources that could save Mom's life. Before exposing him publicly, I would approach him directly, appeal to whatever humanity might remain beneath his manufactured persona. If he had abandoned his past completely, I would offer a devil's bargain. His secret kept in exchange for Mom's treatment. I used my employee knowledge to track Hayes to his office building, arriving during lunch when security was more relaxed. The soaring glass tower of Hayes Enterprises reflected clouds and neighboring skyscrapers, a monument to my father's reinvented success. The lobby security stopped me immediately. Appointment? I need to see Richard Hayes. It's a family emergency. The guard's expression didn't change. Name? Audrey Mitchell. After a brief phone conversation, I was surprisingly escorted to a small conference room off the main lobby. 20 minutes later, Hayes himself appeared, closing the door behind him. Seeing him in his natural environment, immaculate suit, confident posture, the trappings of power surrounding him, the contrast with our struggling life in Queens was physically painful. Miss Mitchell. His voice revealed nothing. Security says you're claiming a family emergency. I studied his surgically altered face, searching for my father in the stranger before me. My mother is dying. Grace Mitchell, your wife. Hayes didn't flinch. I believe you're confused. Save the act, I said, voice steady despite my racing heart. I know who you are, James Mitchell. I have DNA evidence, financial records, everything. But that's not why I'm here. Then why are you here, besides making unfounded accusations? His tone remained even, but I noticed a slight tension in his jaw, my father's tell when he was anxious. Mom needs a kidney transplant and specialized treatment, the kind only money, serious money, can provide. And you believe I should provide this money based on your delusional theory? I leaned forward. I'm not here to expose you. Not yet. I'm offering a deal. Fund Mom's treatment at the best facility available. Ensure she gets the care she needs. And your secret stays safe. Something flickered in Hayes's eyes, recognition, perhaps even guilt, before his expression hardened. Miss Mitchell, I'm not a charity. I don't respond to emotional appeals or thinly veiled blackmail attempts. It's not blackmail. It's a chance for you to do one decent thing after 20 years of hiding. Hayes stood abruptly. I suggest you focus your energies on legitimate means of helping your mother. This conversation is over. As security led me out, I glimpsed Hayes watching from the lobby windows, his expression unreadable but posture tense. Despite his dismissal, I'd seen something in his reaction, a crack in the perfect facade of Richard Hayes. My small victory was short-lived. The following day, I was fired from the Ivory for abandoning my shift during Mom's emergency. My landlord served an eviction notice, claiming corporate ownership was reclaiming the building for renovations. My bank account was frozen due to suspicious activity. Rebecca stopped answering calls. Most alarming, when I visited the hospital, I discovered Mom had been moved from her room. The nurses initially couldn't locate her in the system, causing 30 minutes of panic before a supervisor confirmed she'd been transferred to a different floor without notification. The message was clear. Hayes was using his considerable power to systematically dismantle my life, removing my stability and support systems. I retreated to a cheap motel, paying cash for a week's stay, wondering how long my dwindling resources would last. That evening, slumped on the motel bed watching local news, a story about Hayes Enterprises' upcoming press conference included footage of Hayes himself. The camera caught him entering his building, surrounded by security. I paused the cheap TV, studying his face. Despite everything, I still searched for traces of my father in his features. A knock at the door startled me. The motel wasn't the type that offered room service. Cautiously, I approached the door, grabbing the only potential weapon available, a metal hanger. Who is it? No answer. After a moment's hesitation, I checked through the peephole. The hallway was empty, except for a manila envelope on the floor. I waited several minutes before cracking the door open and snatching the envelope. Inside was $5,000 cash and a handwritten note. Walk away now. The money was both insult and temptation, enough to sustain me briefly, but nowhere near what Mom needed for treatment. More importantly, it confirmed what I already knew. Hayes was vulnerable, concerned enough about my knowledge to attempt a payoff. I tucked the cash into my bag, determination renewed. "You don't know who you're dealing with," I whispered to the empty room. "I'm your daughter, after all." The cheap motel became my war room. I covered one wall with a timeline of James Mitchell's transformation into Richard Hayes, connecting evidence with string like a detective in a crime drama. Operating entirely in cash, using burner phones purchased from different convenience stores, I maintained careful isolation from digital surveillance. I organized all evidence chronologically: photographs of my father, DNA test results, financial records Rebecca had uncovered, building acquisition documents. I recorded a detailed video testimony on a prepaid laptop, providing verbal authentication of each document, explaining connections and implications. Most importantly, I created multiple backup copies of everything, stored in different locations: a safety deposit box rented under a false name, a cloud account accessible only through a specific VPN, physical copies with trusted contacts. If anything happened to me, the truth about Richard Hayes would still emerge. Thomas continued providing information, though our communication became increasingly cautious. "Hayes has hired additional security," he reported during our latest coded conversation. "He's rescheduled meetings, changed routines. He knows someone's closing in. Has he mentioned me specifically? Not by name, but he's ordered comprehensive background checks on everyone with access to his personal information. It's only a matter of time before he connects everything." Through Thomas, I discovered Hayes had silenced others who threatened his carefully constructed identity. A former business associate who asked too many questions about Hayes's background found himself facing fabricated fraud charges. A journalist researching Hayes's origin story had her career destroyed by planted evidence of plagiarism. Most disturbing was the connection to Stephen Brennan's suicide. Thomas provided internal emails suggesting Hayes had systematically undermined Brennan financially after acquiring the architectural firm, ensuring he couldn't rebuild elsewhere. The suicide that had devastated my father's former partner's family now seemed suspicious at best, possibly arranged at worst. While building my case against Hayes, I discovered a news announcement that sent chills through me. Hayes Enterprises was hosting a charity gala supporting kidney disease research, scheduled the night before the press conference. The irony was breathtaking. My father funding research for the very disease killing my mother, while refusing to help her directly. The charity gala represented an unexpected opportunity. Security would be tight but focused primarily on controlling access, not monitoring guests once inside. With hundreds of attendees, staff, and media present, I could potentially confront Hayes publicly before he disappeared to Switzerland. Infiltrating the event required inside help. I contacted Bailey, my former coworker from the Ivory, who had landed a job with the catering company handling the gala. "You want me to sneak you in as what? A server?" Bailey asked when we met in a crowded coffee shop. "Just list me as kitchen staff," I explained. "I don't need to serve, just access." Bailey hesitated. "This sounds sketchy, Audrey. What's your beef with Hayes anyway?" I offered a partial truth. "He's connected to my father's death. I just need 5 minutes with him." "To do what?" "Just talk. Publicly. With witnesses. Nothing dangerous." Bailey studied me skeptically. "The staff entrance is on the east side of the Plaza Hotel. Be there at 5 p.m. sharp, kitchen blacks, black pants, black button-up. Tell security you're with Metropolitan Catering." "But Audrey, if anything happens, we never had this conversation." With access secured, I spent days memorizing the Plaza Hotel's layout, security camera positions, and exit routes. Thomas provided Hayes's schedule for the evening, including his planned speech time and seating arrangement. I created small, easily concealed recording devices, one in a fake service pin, another disguised as a hair clip. The night before the gala, Thomas called unexpectedly. "Hayes has moved up his departure. He's leaving for Switzerland immediately after the press conference, not the following day as previously scheduled. Private jet already fueled and waiting." "Why the change?" "He's received information. I don't know what exactly." That spooked him. "He's acting paranoid, changing plans without explanation, keeping details from even senior staff. Whatever you're planning for the gala, it's your only chance. After tomorrow, he's gone. The gravity of the situation settled over me. After 20 years of absence, my father was preparing to disappear again, this time potentially forever. Despite all my evidence, without direct confrontation, the world would never know the truth about Richard Hayes. That night, I visited Mom in the hospital. Her condition had stabilized temporarily, but the doctor's prognosis remained unchanged. Without a transplant, her time was limited. I sat beside her bed, holding her thin hand, wondering if I should tell her everything. In the end, I left the truth unspoken. Instead, I wrote her a letter explaining everything: James Mitchell's transformation into Richard Hayes, the evidence I'd gathered, my plans for confrontation. I sealed it and placed it in her nightstand drawer, uncertain if she would ever read it. Back at the motel, I was preparing final details when someone knocked. Grabbing my makeshift weapon, I approached cautiously. "It's Rebecca," called a familiar voice. I opened the door to find Rebecca Wells, looking exhausted and apologetic. "I'm sorry for disappearing. Hayes threatened my family, sent photos of my daughter at school, my husband at work. I had to back off." "Why come back now?" "Because I found something you need to see." She handed me a folder. "The original police report from your father's disappearance. It was sealed, but I have contacts." Inside was documentation proving Hayes had paid to have the suicide investigation closed prematurely. Financial records showed payments to the lead detective who had ruled James Mitchell's death a suicide, despite lack of physical evidence. "This completes the picture," Rebecca said. "He staged the suicide, bribed officials to close the case, and walked away clean. I added the documents to my evidence wall. Thank you for bringing this, and for coming back." "What's your plan?" Rebecca asked, surveying my preparation. "Public confrontation at the gala tomorrow. With media present, he can't simply have me removed without causing a scene." Rebecca studied the hotel layouts and security positions I'd mapped. "You've been thorough, but what's your endgame here? What happens after the confrontation?" It was a question I'd avoided asking myself. "Justice," I said simply. "He needs to face consequences for abandoning us, for stealing his partner's work, for letting Mom suffer while he lives in luxury." Rebecca nodded slowly. "Just be prepared for every possibility. Men like Hayes don't go down easily, and they rarely go down alone." That night, I barely slept. 20 years of questions, anger, and loss culminated in tomorrow's confrontation. Whatever happened, by this time tomorrow, Richard Hayes would no longer be able to hide from his past as James Mitchell. The Plaza Hotel gleamed in the evening light, its iconic facade illuminated for the Hayes Enterprises Charity Gala. Limousines and luxury cars deposited New York's elite at the red-carpeted entrance, photographers capturing each arrival. I approached from the service alley, heart pounding beneath my borrowed catering uniform. "Metropolitan Catering," I told the security guard, showing the temporary ID Bailey had provided. He checked his list, waved me through without a second glance. The hotel's kitchen was controlled chaos. Chefs barking orders, servers arranging delicate hors d'oeuvres on silver trays, bartenders stocking portable bars. Bailey spotted me and hurried over. "Jesus, Audrey, you look terrible. Did you sleep at all?" "Not really." My hands trembled slightly as I adjusted my disguised recording devices. "Is everything ready?" Bailey nodded. "Hayes is scheduled to speak at 8:30. He's currently working the room, table 9, northwest corner of the ballroom. Security is positioned at all main exits and around his table." I took a deep breath. "Thank you for this. I won't forget it." "Just don't get arrested on my shift," Bailey replied, squeezing my arm before returning to her station. I slipped into the grand ballroom, staying close to the walls, analyzing the scene. 500 guests in formal attire mingled beneath crystal chandeliers, orbiting the room's true center of gravity, Richard Hayes. He moved confidently between tables, shaking hands, accepting congratulations for his charitable work. The irony was sickening. For nearly an hour, I observed from the periphery, waiting for the perfect moment. Security guards communicated via earpieces, eyes constantly scanning. Hayes's personal security detail never strayed more than 10 feet from him. Approaching him directly would trigger immediate removal. At 8:25, Hayes excused himself from his current conversation and approached the podium. The room quieted as he tapped the microphone. Camera flashes intensified. Media representatives positioning themselves for optimal coverage. Distinguished guests, thank you for joining Hayes Enterprises in supporting kidney disease research, he began, voice projecting confidence and compassion. This cause holds personal significance for me. Throughout my life, I've witnessed the devastating impact of kidney disease on families. The audacity of his statement nearly propelled me forward prematurely. This man had abandoned his kidney-diseased wife and daughter, leaving us to struggle while he accumulated billions. Tonight, Hayes Enterprises is proud to announce a $50 million donation to establish the Hayes Center for Kidney Research at Columbia University Medical Center. Applause thundered through the ballroom. Hayes smiled modestly, the perfect philanthropist. As he stepped away from the podium, photographers surged forward. The moment had arrived. I grabbed a champagne tray from a nearby server station and moved purposefully toward Hayes. His security was momentarily distracted by the press photographers, creating a brief opening in their formation. 3 steps. 2 steps. With deliberate precision, I bumped into Hayes, spilling champagne across his immaculate suit. "I am so sorry, sir," I exclaimed loudly, drawing attention. Security immediately moved toward us, but hesitated at Hayes's gesture. "No harm done," Hayes said dismissively, not truly looking at me as an attendant, handed him a napkin. I positioned myself directly in his line of sight. "I really should know better, Dad." Hayes froze, champagne-soaked napkin halfway to his jacket. His eyes met mine, recognition and shock registering simultaneously. "Security, please remove this server," he said, voice unnaturally tight. "James Mitchell abandoned his family 20 years ago," I announced loudly, backing away as security approached. "He faked his suicide, stole his partner's designs, and reinvented himself as Richard Hayes, while his wife slowly died of kidney disease." The ballroom fell silent. Cameras turned toward the unfolding drama. "This person is clearly disturbed," Hayes stated firmly. "Remove her immediately." Security hesitated, aware of the media attention now focused on the scene. "I have DNA evidence proving Richard Hayes is James Mitchell," I continued, volume increasing as security closed in. "Financial records showing how he staged his death and bribed officials to close the investigation. Evidence of identity theft, fraud, embezzlement." Hayes's expression hardened. "This woman is mentally unstable. Her mother was my former housekeeper who was terminated for theft. She's been harassing me for months." The calculated lie nearly stole my breath. Even now, he was willing to destroy what remained of our dignity. "My mother is Grace Mitchell, your wife," I countered. "She's currently in Queens Memorial Hospital, dying of kidney failure while you donate millions to research instead of helping your own family." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Journalists frantically took notes. Cameras continued flashing. Hayes' security finally reached me, gripping my arms to escort me out. "Ask him about Stephen Brennan's suicide," I called as they dragged me toward the exit. "Ask about Brennan and Associates architectural firm. Ask why there are no records of Richard Hayes before 2005. Just as security pushed me through the service doors, an authoritative voice called, "Stop." Thomas stepped forward, holding an envelope. "Mr. Hayes, I think you should see this before we remove her." Hayes glared at his assistant. "Not now, Thomas." "Sir, these documents were delivered to our office this morning." Thomas opened the envelope, revealing official-looking papers. "They appear to be authenticated records connecting you to James Mitchell. The FBI has copies." The crowd's murmuring intensified. Hayes' face paled visibly. "This is a private matter," Hayes announced, attempting to regain control. "Please continue enjoying the evening. Security, clear the area." As guards began herding onlookers away, a distinguished man in a conservative suit approached, flashing credentials. "Richard Hayes?" I'm Special Agent Marcus Wilson, FBI. We'd like to ask you some questions regarding financial irregularities surrounding the acquisition of Brennan and Associates. Hayes's composure cracked completely. I'll answer questions through my attorneys. Of course, sir. However, given the nature of the allegations and evidence presented, we'll need you to accompany us now. The ballroom erupted in chaos as additional agents appeared. Photographers documented everything as Hayes was escorted toward the exit, his face a mask of cold fury. Thomas approached me as security released my arms. I've been working with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division for 2 years, he explained quietly. Hayes has been under investigation for securities fraud, tax evasion, and suspicious foreign transactions. Your evidence provided the missing link to his original identity and the source of his initial capital. I watched in stunned silence as my father, the man who had abandoned us, reinvented himself, and accumulated billions while we struggled, was led away by federal agents. What happens now? I asked. Investigation, charges, likely prosecution. His assets will be frozen pending outcome. Given the evidence, he's facing significant prison time. 3 months later, I sat across from Mom in our new apartment, modest but comfortable, with proper medical equipment and a visiting nurse. The Victim Compensation Fund had covered her specialized treatment while the case against Hayes progressed. She wasn't cured, but stable enough to leave the hospital, with promising treatment options on the horizon. News coverage of the Hayes identity scandal had dominated headlines for weeks. Federal prosecutors had filed dozens of charges, from identity fraud to securities violations. Hayes Enterprises stock had plummeted, though the company survived under new leadership. Most satisfying was the discovery and restoration of Stephen Brennan's stolen architectural designs, with proper credit and compensation to his widow. The knock at our door was expected, but still jarring. The corrections officer nodded politely as I gathered my belongings for the supervised visit to the Metropolitan Detention Center. Hayes, I still couldn't think of him as Dad, sat on the other side of the plexiglass partition, prison jumpsuit replacing custom suits. His face showed the strain of confinement, but his eyes remained defiant. "Why did you want to see me?" he asked after I was seated. "I needed to understand why. Why you left us. Why you never came back, even after you had millions." Hayes leaned forward. I was about to be arrested for embezzlement. Brennan discovered I'd been skimming from client accounts. I had a choice: go to prison or disappear. "You could have taken us with you," I countered, "or supported us from afar. And risk exposure? Grace never could keep a secret." His voice softened slightly. "I convinced myself you were better off with the insurance money. That starting over completely was the only option. Mom never got any insurance money. The policy didn't pay out without a confirmed death. We lost everything: our house, our savings, her health." For the first time, genuine surprise registered on his face. "The transfer to your account was frozen during the investigation. By the time it cleared, creditors took everything." Hayes sat back, momentarily silent. "I told myself you'd moved on. That checking would only endanger my new identity. You told yourself whatever made it easier to enjoy your billions while we suffered." "I built something extraordinary," he insisted. "Changed the world with my designs." "Brennan's designs?" I corrected. "You stole his work, along with his future. 2 families destroyed so you could be Richard Hayes." Hayes studied me through the plexiglass. "You're more like me than you realize. The planning, the determination, the willingness to see things through. You took down a billionaire." "I'm nothing like you," I replied, standing to leave. "I chose truth over comfort, family over wealth. Some signatures can be forged, but the mark you leave on others' lives is permanent. And finally, you're facing the truth you've been running from for 20 years. As I walked away, Hayes called after me. "Audrey, ask yourself this. If you'd succeeded in becoming someone else, someone better, would you have thrown it all away?" I didn't answer. The question wasn't worth acknowledging. Identity isn't something you can steal or invent. It's built through choices and relationships. My father had chosen to become a wealthy stranger rather than remain our struggling family man. In the end, Wealth couldn't protect him from the consequences of that choice. Outside the detention center, I breathed deeply, feeling lighter than I had in years. The journey wasn't over. Mom's health remained fragile. Hayes's trial loomed, and rebuilding our lives would take time. Forgiveness might never come completely, but finally, having truth, acknowledgement, and justice opened possibilities I'd never imagined. I took out my phone and checked Mom's latest test results the doctor had sent, improving steadily. The kidney specialist believed she was now eligible for transplant waiting lists previously closed to her. We had time now. We had hope. What would you have done in my position? Would you have exposed your long-lost parent if they abandoned you, or tried to rebuild a relationship? Have you ever discovered something shocking about someone close to you? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to hear more real-life stories of family secrets and unexpected reunions. Thanks for listening to my journey. And remember, sometimes the most important signature isn't on paper, but the impact we leave on others' lives.